Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're talking about something a bit different. We're going to be talking about, as you saw in the title, probably my favorite deity in D&D, and that is Stronmaus. Now, I'm not 100% certain that I'm pronouncing it correctly. The phonetic spelling is on the screen now, but he's also known as the Smiling God, or the Storm Lord, or the Thunderhead, and he is a member of the Giant Pantheon. Now, you're thinking, oh, I haven't heard of this guy, and I've played a bit of D&D. I've heard, of a few D&D deities. Why do I know this guy? Well, I think the Giants Pantheon tends to be a little bit underrepresented in a lot of the material that is released. In fact, they did my boy dirty in 5th edition, and they like killed him off screen. But we're just going to talk to him about him like he's still alive. He was murdered by Tiamat, so if you are playing Rise of Tiamat, this could be a fantastic deity to use. Then you have kind of like a vengeance story. In fact, that is what I did. My first character in 5th edition was a Tempest cleric, and then later on, I ended up playing another game of Rise of Tiamat, and I kind of revamped that character a little bit and brought him back. Different name, but same basic concept. And instead of it being focusing on more of the Cloud Giant stuff, I focused a little bit more on the Storm Giant stuff and made it kind of a vengeance kind of story. So let's get into what I'm talking about with the whole Cloud and Storm Giant stuff. So the belief system of this deity is kind of split because there are two major groups that worship them: the Cloud Giants and the Storm Giants. So all of them kind of believe in the cleansing or redeeming effects of rain and the joy of freedom, but the Cloud Giants focus more on the merriment of the deity and like the joyful aspects of them, and being kind of like a father figure to them in many senses. While the Giants are very nihilistic and they're very passionate, so they kind of believe life is a series of tests, weather against the storm, and like kind of life and all of the struggles you have are almost futile and against the giant storm that is Stronmaus. Like Stronmaus is like this incredibly powerful elemental force, and a lot of their traditions are like, hey, I'm gonna push myself to the absolute breaking point, to the absolute limit, so I can become stronger, so I can weather the storm longer, kind of thing. But in the end, we all get consumed by the storm. So I think if you can use both of those and have like a really good character that has some duality to them, like you can have a very kind and jovial kind of character, and then they kind of just go on these like random kind of nihilistic or say these like really nihilistic awful things, but like in a joyful way. They can kind of be funny, and if you do it well and you have your timing is good, it can be actually really funny. I've done that quite a few times where it's like, oh, it's just a very happy, nice character, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, like we are infinitesimal specks in the universe and nothing matters. You can hit them with some of the classic, not really like nihilistic stuff, and it's still on brand of the deity, which is fun. And kind of switching between the clown giant and the storm giant beliefs can make you a rather interesting character. Now let's go into kind of some of the rituals, right? I mentioned it with the storm giants, but I didn't mention the cloud giants one. So the cloud giants, they do little things like spreading incense and stuff in the wind in the mornings and praying whenever there's rain and stuff like that. But they have this big thing that they do once a year. It's called the Umjag, which I believe is how you pronounce it. It is a sacred sky hunt. And the idea is to kill chimeras, wyverns, or chromatic dragons because the enemy of Stronmaus is chromatic dragons. And kind of the way they see it is they're cleansing the sky, these evil flying deities, because they're kind of a mockery of our God, because our God is the God of the sun and the sky. And these evil things invading the sky is kind of looks bad on him. And they don't want people to fear the sky because they want them to accept the joy and the happiness from their deity, right? So again, like very interesting. You could do like the challenges and pushing yourself to the absolute limit so you can weather a storm, or you can be like, oh, well, they're trying to make the things associated with their god better so that people don't fear them because they want them to respect them because they want them to respect their deity. So again, two different ways of approaching the same deity. They give you kind of, you can draw from both and give you some different aspects. Another thing that I like to always bring in, now this is only for like the priest of the god, but I tend to make it a rule for my characters just because it adds some additional role playing elements. They cannot build fires. They cannot make fire of any kind without it being from some sort of like lightning. Like if lightning strikes and it causes a fire, that's one thing. But like using flint and steel or any magic that generates fire, it's a big no go, big against the rules. You don't have to do this. This isn't even mentioned, I don't believe, in 5th edition. I believe this is like a 3.3rd edition kind of thing that I kind of took and brought over. But again, you don't have to do this because it would only be giants that would follow this. But this is something I like to bring in because I think it makes interesting role playing. Now, I played a Goliath. I believe both times I played this character. Actually, maybe the first time it was a human. I don't remember. I don't remember what race it was the first time I played as Storm Cleric or Tempest Cleric. The second time I played a Tempest Cleric, it definitely was a Goliath. And not being able to see in the dark and not being able to create fire does indeed create some interesting role playing moments. Now, of course, you can just take the light spell, which would be the smart way of doing it. And that is what I did do. But you can't always have light available to you. And it also can create some interesting moments where if you don't have the light spell because you have dark vision, but another party member doesn't have dark vision and you don't have the light spell, no one has the light spell, and you can't create fire and torches for them to see, that could cause some interesting role playing situations as well. But again, that is optional. That is from older editions. I'm pretty sure that's not even mentioned in the 5th edition material. Well, there isn't really any 5th edition material, I guess, nowadays for this character because they, like I mentioned earlier, they killed him off. Next, I guess I'll talk about kind of the imagery of the deity. So the deity, when appearing to people in like an avatar or something of that nature, typically is shown as a giant, obviously, with blue eyes, wavy auburn hair, wearing gold-edged white robes, and the character lives in a giant palace that floats above the beast lands. On the Great Wheel, the beast lands is somewhere in between good and chaotic good, so general good area. And the giant floating palace made of marble can teleport and move around and fly and all that. So it can go to different areas of the beast lands, different like subsections and stuff. And he can visit other planes and all that jazz. The marble palace has a bunch of gold and platinum and gemstones. So it's really beautiful and elegant. It's just, like lazily floating across the sky with clouds under it. So yeah, it's a very beautiful sight. The emblem of the god has been on the screen probably by now, and it's what you see. It's a forked lightning coming from a cloud with the sun. Now we've kind of talked about role playing using the belief system, and we've kind of talked about some restrictions you put on your character to make it more interesting. But something else you can do if you want to play a campaign that is using dragons heavily, such as Rise of Tiamat, you can play it that your god was killed, and maybe your order is on a final sacred sky hunt, and your kind of role in that hunt is to kill as many dragons as you can before you are taken yourself, and kind of a way to avenge your fallen deity that was killed by the queen of dragons. And that can be a really interesting way to do it. When I played a Tempest cleric the second time, it was for a Rise of Tiamat campaign, and that is the angle that I took. I made it where my character would like absolutely want to fight basically any chromatic dragon. It's not all dragons, first off, like, even in the documentation, right, it says chromatic dragons, wyverns, and chimeras. So please don't be one of those characters that just tries to fight every single dragon you see, because that goes against the ideals, first off, of the deity. And the reason why is because the metallic dragons are typically good. So if the metallic dragons are good and the deity is good, then it associates the sky with good things, right? So we don't want to kill metallic dragons. If your DM gives you a metallic dragon friend to make your life easier, don't try and fight it and be like, oh, well, Leroy told me that Stronmaus hates dragons. That's not what I said, is chromatic dragons. Although gem dragons aren't mentioned. I don't know if gem dragons are even in 5th edition. They're typically neutral. It's not mentioned gem dragons, so if you wanna murder it or not murder it, I think it's fair game. I think it's fair game either way. So, hey, I'll give you that one as a freebie to make up for the telling you not to kill the metallic dragons. So, fair. The last thing I kinda wanna talk about in this video is more of a general thing. So we're gonna move away from the deity. Giant Pantheon is much less talked about than I think a lot of the ones from typical player races, such as, like, humans or elves. Because, like I said, it's not typically a player race. It's kind of a monster. Typically, giants are typically monsters. There are Goliaths who are from giants, so you could make the argument that they could follow giant deities. Although honestly, I think it's really cool when players try to do things that are different, and typically my DMs are also happy that I didn't just pick the same generic deities, and when I pick one that they're less familiar with, they tend to be a little bit happier with it because it's something new, it's something exciting. It's not like, oh, this is the 20th time I've ran a cleric of Lathander or whatever, right? It's something a bit unique. So I would encourage you to go out and maybe look at the other deities outside of the typical player characters. You might find something really cool and interesting that a lot of people don't play with because it's not an elf deity or a human deity or dwarves. Dwarves are pretty popular as well. And they might really appreciate that. In fact, I've used a halfling deity before for a character, and my DM hadn't heard of that one either because it wasn't in the main ones. I mean, I think when you just Google D&D deities, it tends just to give you like the really big ones that are typically used in humans and elves. And like I said, just go out and find some of the niche ones. You'll be interesting because it's something new. You might find something really interesting like this deity has a real duality to them and can help you, inform your decision making process and have a little bit more of a nuanced character. And at the end of the day, like we as individuals need prompts, and I think constraints are good for improv. I think if you kind of can do anything all the time, almost the freedom of choice can give you decision paralysis, right? Where you have so many options, you don't know what option to pick. So putting some constraints on your character, things that like you can't light fires, or that you believe in the sky hunts, and you're like really passionate about killing chimeras, wyverns, and chromatic dragons. So you might not be very keen to run away from a fight from one of them because it's they're like an abomination in your eyes. They're an insult to your deity. Can cause some interesting role playing perspectives. Now you shouldn't be blind. You shouldn't be totally blind to reason. You shouldn't totally disregard everything because sometimes your DM might just be like, okay, there's this evil black dragon, and we're going to do some foreshadowing with them like flying over or destroying a village, and they don't expect you to actually fight the black dragon at that time. It might just be foreshadowing for a later conflict, and you might try and fight it, and it's very heavily implied that you should leave, you should run away from it and hide, and like get stronger, and then come back and like kill it, and that way it would be satisfying later when you kill it, and you refuse to. Don't do that. Please don't do that. It's not what's intended. If your DM is very heavily suggesting that your character should leave, leave. If you, but if there's a situation where it's at the point where you should kill the dragon, right? Maybe you're doing final lair, and maybe you're worried that other party members die. Maybe like being more heroic and maybe sacrificing yourself so that your other party members could get away would be something more in line with what that character would do when fighting one of those creatures, because your character is very passionate about fighting them. And also, you can kind of tie in the storm giant thing with you pushing yourself to your absolute limit, and maybe you just went a little too far because you have the cloud giant belief. So you can, again, nuance. You can have a lot of fun with this deity. Check out the other deities and more niche sections. You might find something good. The giants one has like this whole like ordering thing where like certain giants are better than others. It's I think it's based on like kind of caste systems and kind of showing off or just like a fantasy version of like caste systems that you might find in certain cultures and in the real world. And I think for the most part, luckily, a lot of those kind of caste-based societies have kind of gotten away from it for the most part. I don't think it's as strict as it used to be back in the day, but it's very similar where like some giants are just considered objectively better and rule over other types of giants. And how that like literally like certain types of giants are dumber than other ones. And there's the whole thing about like the giant mother that made the giants being a floozy and just like banging a bunch of other deities and making like a bunch of random non-giant races. That's where like Furbolg and Goliath and a bunch of them come from. It's very Greek, I guess, in that sense, where there's like there like Zeus was kind of same way, where he would be going around and banging a bunch of humans and making a bunch of half gods, right? Same kind of dealio where Althea is her name. So yeah, Althea was getting around, so a bunch of the subgiants or the giant kin, I guess is what they're referred to, are Althea's children that were not with Nam, the Allfire or the Prime. And Nam was like the head of the pantheon, but then he disappeared, and then when he disappeared, Stronmaus came in charge of it. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. There's a whole thing with ordering and there's a bunch of shenanigans going on in the giant deities. There's quite a lot of lore there. It's a lot of it's older. It's not as talked about, I don't believe, in the newer books in 5th edition, or I guess 6th edition or 5.5 or whatever they're going to call it. It's coming out soon. I don't know if they're going to explore more in there, but there's some great stuff. It's interesting. I would encourage you to check it out on your own. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.